Someone has knocked on our door this evening and stepped across the threshold as one of our house guests. He's now crossing over from the normal world into our haunted house. Welcome to the Looks Creepy Cool podcast, part of Haunted House Fear Fest. I'm your host, Renee, and tonight I'm joined by Nathan Wulf, game developer of KOOK, which is part of the Looks Creepy Cool showcase in the Haunted House Fear Fest Festival lineup that starts on October 6th. Together, we'll wander room by room through the haunted house and uncover what makes his game so creepy cool. Let's step inside. Hi, Nathan. How are you?
Hello, I'm doing well. Thank you for having me
Awesome.
on.
Yeah, I'm excited. I'm stoked, man. At 8 o'clock. You're in the US too, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I am too. I'm on New York time. Are you on East
East
Coast
Coast,
time
yeah,
or?
yeah.
Oh, okay. Oh, awesome. That's
Though
great.
I am
Yeah.
a bit nocturnal, although my schedule is just all over the place. Sometimes I'm up till the afternoon and then sometimes it's just whatever.
Wow. So are you developing another game or is it just you're playing games? Like, what is it?
I just have trouble sleeping is the biggest thing. But yeah, the game development plays a role as well. But since I am an indie dev and I
Yeah.
am on my own now, it does make it sort of convenient that I can sort of set my own schedule. Although I do keep a consistent stream schedule, so I try to be on around the 7 to 9 p.m. time, starting East Coast time.
Oh, that's great. So that's okay. That's like haunted house vampire type time. So that's perfectly fine. So I'm gonna share my screen and show our Steam page in the game. And just so you know, Steam, I'm saying this to everyone that they're not we approved for it to be published, but we can't publish it till the day before the day of the festival. But
Gotcha.
people can find us on Haunted House Fear Fest because I got emails like, Renee, how come we don't see the page? We can't add it to the wish list. I'm like, it's Steam. They won't let me until the day before. And this is our first time. So I wasn't expecting so many games and
Mm,
I'm just it's a lot. It's a
yeah.
lot. And I have a lot of game judges, which I'm very happy about. But yeah, so this is like huge already. So this is the page. I don't know if you can see. Yeah, so this is the page right here. And then you're in Creepy Cool Demo. So if we go over again, and we go over again. So there's Kook. And I'm just going to play the trailer. Sorry. Just so everyone knows, Kook is a fast-paced, Quake-like retro first-player shooter in a Victorian era steampunk setting with Lovecraftian monsters, distorted time and gravity, and crazy weapons. So cool. Okay. For time's sake, I'm just going to stop it here. But this game is amazing. So I have so many questions and I wrote them down, but one of them is like, how did you come up with the concept? How did you come up with like the design of the monsters?
So when I first went indie, I actually started on another game called Fist of the Forgotten. And I was trying to make something that was a little smaller in scope, that was sort of a platformer and a silhouette style. And it turns out, games take a long time to make. And the more I worked on it, the more I wanted to make it stand out. And I was also kind of struggling to get some traction. During the process of my game development, I'd learned quite a bit. And I felt initially that like a first person shooter was a bit too ambitious to do as a solo dev. But with everything that I learned and some of the struggles that I had getting visibility on a platformer, because there's just so many platformers out there, I decided to go back more to my roots, which is Quake. Like I played Quake when I was growing up. I made maps and mods and all kinds of stuff like that. So I was like deeply entrenched in the Quake community. Many people may have known me from the paintball mod. Is probably the biggest one that I worked on. So there was a paintball mod for Quake, and then there was a paintball 2 mod for Quake 2. But I decided, at first it was like a side project that I was working on every once in a while I was primarily focused on Fist of the Forgotten. And then as time went on, I was just kind of like gauging the wishlist numbers and stuff like that. And it seemed like KOOK was a better fit, both from my experience, growing up playing Quake and modding Quake and having like a target audience. So that's one thing I really struggled with on Fist of the Forgotten. If you want to talk about scary stuff on the podcast, the scariest thing as an indie dev is like actually getting people to see and care about your game. There's so many games and stuff out there, and it's just so difficult to get visibility. So
Yeah.
I'm still working on Fist of the Forgotten, but it's like one day a week now, and I've switched over to working on KOOK as my primary project. So with that one, I took a different approach where I was like, well, let me take a game that has a target audience that I'm familiar with and that I can reach, and that is the Quake community. Like I said, I'm heavily involved with the modding community and stuff. So I'll take that target audience, I'll build a game that's like Quake, and that's also something that I love to play. So it works really well with that. And I guess one of the key factors of the game that I really wanted to try was take Quake, which has that very limited resources and stuff that they had back then. So I had very low resolution textures and things like that, and low poly model stuff and stuff. But take that and somewhat modernize it and still stick with the retro aesthetic, but take, for example, the lighting and make the lighting apply as though it were in the scene. So if you take a look at some of the textures in Quake, they might have some rivets or something like that, and the shadows are casted downward because that's just painted onto the texture. But what I wanted to do was be like, well, if there's a light below it, then the shadows should cast upward from those rivets. And
That's
so
where
it
you
started
got
off
it
as kind of like a
from.
tech experiment
Yeah.
to build a shader that could have like self-shadowing but still look like the super chunky low res textures and stuff like that. So that was kind of the visual aesthetic that I was going for, is Quake, but if each texture were authored for the environment that it was in. So if you've got like lava lighting something from below, you'd have that red
Mhm.
light and it would be casting shadows. If you've got kind of an irregular brick or stone wall, like some of the stones would be
Right.
sticking out and they'll be casting shadows in different directions based on the lighting and stuff. And I think it really kind of sets the mood to be a little more spooky and atmospheric than sort of the kind of pre-baked textures, if you will.
Yeah.
As far as the models and enemy designs and stuff like that, a lot of that just came from all over the place. Some stuff were things that I just kind of thought of, like the robot that fires grenades.
Right.
I was kind of thinking like one thing that I wanted to have in this game was the ability to load up original Quake levels. So I would sort of need some enemies that kind of fit like what the original enemies were. And one of the enemies was like an ogre, and it fires grenades and it has a melee attack with a chainsaw. And so I was kind of envisioning like, well, what if we took that and made like a steampunk robot and that like fired grenades out of a turret that was kind of its head. And then if you get close to it, it swings its arms around. And I call it the clonker because if you get too close, you get clonked in the face
Oh my
and
god.
get launched around.
Nathan, you have such a creepy mind and I love it. Like that's impressive. Like I've had a ton of interviews already and no developer so far has described such a creepier type of design they set for their monsters and just like how your head is working. So like that's pretty creepy and it's very cool. I love it.
Yeah, and some of the enemy designs I did want to take some like Quake had a lot like some Lovecraftian monsters and stuff in there. And since Lovecraftian stuff is kind of big, I thought I'd take a couple things and model them after like some of the actual Lovecraft writings. And
Mhm.
so one of them is the Migo, which is described as like a pink fungal creature with like sort of iridescent wings and stuff like that. And so I basically kind of took the description and tried to build my own interpretation of that that's different than what a lot of the artists and stuff have drawn. So there's all kinds of different interpretations of the Migo. Another thing was that they would communicate via like flashing their heads different colors and stuff. So I had to build the technology in there where I could actually, through animation, what I do is I have a special bone that when it moves around, I read it in the script and it drives the color of the head so I can animate it. So, in the animation, I can drive the head color so that that'll change using a shader. So got all kinds of fun stuff
That is
like that.
crazy. So, like, what is your if you can tell us, like, what your background is, like, how did you, like, really get into gaming and, like yeah, like, I'm just so impressed. Like, yeah, what is your background?
So game development is something that I've always wanted to do ever since I was little, got on computer and played like basic games like way back in the day,
Like Duck Hunt,
Well, there was I
Super
think
Mario Brothers.
yeah, those weren't actually written in basic. Those were on the Nintendo system, which I never had a Nintendo system, so
No?
those were not really the games that I played growing up. I mean, I played them a couple times when I visited like friends and family,
Mhm.
but I grew up, I'm almost a PC thoroughbred, I guess, because we did have one console. We had the Odyssey 2, which was like
Oh, I
super
remember
super
that.
retro.
Yeah.
But I think that was my grandparent. I don't know how we ended up with it, but or where it even went. But I know we had it for a little while. I think my grandparents had it and let me borrow it or something like that. But for the most part, it was PC games. So I would get in and mess around in the code of like basic games and then Q Basic. There was like a Gorillas game. Some people may be familiar with that one, where you'd throw bananas. It was kind of like a scorched earth kind of game.
Oh,
And so, yeah. And then I went to college and got a degree in computer science at Clemson University. And I wanted to get into a studio, but getting into the game industry is very difficult. It's so
yeah.
difficult to get your foot in the door initially. And then it used to be once you had your foot in the door, it was a lot easier. But now with the industry and the state that it's in, even people that are experienced are struggling to get jobs. I was kind of hoping that if something happened with my indie career, I could go back into the studio industry. But I'm hoping
Yeah.
KOOK is successful because I don't know if I'd even be able to get a job now.
Oh, man, I mean, it's just so crazy what's
Yeah,
going
there've
on, like,
been
especially,
so many
like, the
layoffs and
gaming
stuff.
yeah, the tech industry, but gaming in particular, like, that started, I think I remember last year or maybe earlier than that. No, I think it was, like, last year, like, so many massive layoffs. It was like, "It's video games, like, why are all these
Right.
companies laying, like, people off?" It's crazy.
Yeah. But I did get in the industry after I worked at a data conversion services place for a while. So
Mhm.
got some interesting experience there, kind of like trying to reverse engineer compression algorithms and stuff. Like banks would come to us with, old formats of some system that is, the company no longer exists anymore. And we're like, we got to get our data to a new system. And so I'd figure out how to take that and convert it into a system or a format that they could pull into their new systems. And then I got into I was very briefly working at one place, but then I ended up I guess my first big job in AAA would be at Red Storm Entertainment, which is part of
Mm,
Ubisoft, and was working on some of the Ghost Recon and Far Cry games. And then went over to Bosky Productions, which is the studio that Cliff Bleszinski started up. He's known for the Unreal Tournament series and Gears of War and things like that. And he wanted to bring back the arena shooter, and that's the kind of game that I love. So it's like,
wow.
yes. And so I went over there and we worked on Lawbreakers. Unfortunately, it never really gained traction and the studio shut down. And then I was like, well, now is probably the best possible time for me to try going indie. And
Yeah.
so I started up Lone Wolf Studio, spelled with a U because my last name is Wolf with a U. So
Yeah.
Lone Wolf Studio, it's me, and I'm a lone wolf.
Yeah. Yeah, but you're
Seemed fitting.
mighty. You're mighty.
So that's kind of my background. So I've got a lot of experience. I was doing gameplay programming primarily while I was working at those studios. So I have a lot of experience doing gameplay programming, but I'm kind of a generalist and I like doing art and stuff. But the nice thing about being an indie is I get to explore and do other things that I wasn't able to do at a studio. Like if you're working at a big
Right.
studio, you're kind of stuck doing
What
like
they tell you,
what
yeah.
I mean, it makes sense because if you've got a
Mhm.
studio of 100 plus people, they're going to, put people in roles where they're doing what they are, able to do like the most efficiently.
Yeah.
So it doesn't really make sense to take a guy that's primarily a programmer and say, here, you want to do some art for a bit? Because, that's like, I would not be as proficient at building art as the people that have been doing that for years and have that as their primary experience. But as
Right.
an indie dev, now I'm able to delve into 3D modeling and level design and sound design and music and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And it's got its pros and cons, but I like bouncing around and doing different stuff. I get kind of bored if I'm like stuck doing the same thing over and over again. So it's
Yeah.
nice to be able to change it up. And I actually have a kind of schedule on my days. So, like Mondays, I call it Mapping Monday. So I focus primarily on doing mapping and a little bit of marketing. It's Mapping and Marketing Monday. And then Tuesday is my To Do Tuesday, where I'm going through the to do list
MMT.
and trying to knock out things that are, like bugs and stuff that I've got listed that need to get done to get the game shipped. And then
Mhm.
Wednesday is wished for Wednesday. So people that are watching my stream and stuff have requests, although I do limit it to just one request per person. So I don't have like a huge scope creep of all kinds of
Yeah.
crazy ideas. So, I try to work on those things that people want. And Thursday is tab close Thursday. So all this time as I'm going around and scrolling through social media and stuff, I find cool things that are either inspiration or reference or some, cool photos of like a castle or something like that and be like, oh, that'd be cool to, you know, make into a level or some shader or some cool thing, and then I've just like accumulated all these tabs that are things that I want to look into at some point, but it seems like there's never time. And then I kind of dedicate Thursday to kind of going through all of that stuff and seeing, if there's any cool things that I could use in my game or whatever. And then I've got Fist of the Forgotten Friday where I go back and work on my Fist of the Forgotten project.
Wow. Well, you know what? That, like, is such a motivator to have themes for every day, like whether your to-do list or things like that. So, that's very impressive. So I hopefully on Saturdays, like today, besides doing the podcast, like you rest a bit.
Yeah, so Saturdays are kind of wild card days.
Mhm.
So I do actually have another game that was originally a Quake 2 mod called Paintball 2, Digital Paint Paintball 2, that we do Paintball 2 social Saturdays every other Saturday. So today we were actually playing some Paintball 2 before the podcast, and I still work on that a little bit. Um, and it's kind of a miscellaneous day. Sometimes I work on, some tools or like my Twitch bot that has some chats and overlays and sound commands and all kinds of stuff like that. So that'll be the type of thing I work on Saturday. And Sunday is my rest day. Usually I play games with some friends and, just kind of catch up and rest and whatever. That's the one day that I'm usually not streaming. Although we used to do Dungeons and Dragons with some friends, but our dungeon master got busy with life stuff. So,
So who's the new
that's kind of how it
master?
goes. Well, we're not doing the
We're not
Dungeons and
doing it
Dragons
anymore.
anymore. So I was streaming that on Sunday, but now we just kind of have some sort of casual gaming with some friends and stuff around that same time that we used to do the Dungeons and Dragons.
That's awesome. So, we're going to move into the Library of Shadows. So, this is where you tell us your horror origin story. Like, what got you into horror? What age? Was it a movie, a film? Or was it a movie? Was it a video game? Or were you visited by something very creepy when you were younger?
So I guess, like I mentioned before, Quake was kind of my big inspiration for this project. Quake is what I grew up on. And it was originally kind of a horror game. It definitely has the horror elements. But, it's one of those things where I think the action supersedes the horror. And that's kind of what I'm going with in Kook. It's like, it's a really creepy atmospheric game, but at the same time, you are a powerhouse. You've got like a triple barrel shotgun and like a 9-barreled rifle and this weapon that shoots giant wooden spikes and can peg things into walls and you know create time distortion, slow them down, stuff like that. So you've got all of these tools at your disposal to fight all of these creepy monstrosities. So I I've never really been one that is like super scared by things. I do enjoy a good, like something that, gets my heart going because it doesn't really happen that often. So there's not like a whole lot that like really spooks me out.
You're, it's hard to scare you, basically.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's not impossible, but so games that are primarily focused on just atmosphere and kind of like walking around and it's like, creepy things show up. Those don't do a whole lot for me, but I do like games that have that theme. I think Fear was a really good game for that atmosphere and also like combat. So it would kind of go back and forth and there'd be moments where almost the scariest parts where nothing is happening. You're going down
Yeah.
a dark hallway and you're like,
Yeah.
you're expecting something to happen. There's that tension there. And then maybe Alma shows up and maybe she doesn't.
Right.
Or, maybe it's just another enemy that shows up, And so that's kind of what I'm going for in Kook. We've got like all this atmosphere and it's got like a lot of adrenaline action and stuff, but there's still some things that can sometimes even, even though I made the levels and put the enemies and stuff there,
Yeah.
something like comes around the corner that I'm not expecting because I, triggered it somewhere else. And then all of a sudden there's this giant creature with mouths everywhere that's right in my face. And it's like, whoa, you're not helpless. You've got the tools to fight these things, but
Right.
it can still be scary.
Yeah. No, definitely. So, how long did it take you to I know the game, have its like to be announced. Do you know when it's going to come out? And then also, how long did it take you to put the game together?
So I am on stream. I think it's number 514. So those are not 514 consecutive days. Like I said, this was a
Mhm.
side project initially, and I'm
Yeah.
working on it like 4 days a week. So it's been 2+ years, I think, of development, or somewhere
Wow.
around 2 years of development so far. and probably going to be another 2+ years to finish it. We'll see. Hopefully, once I got most of the core stuff down now, and I can focus on building the levels and kind of putting all the content and stuff together to make it more than a 30-minute experience or whatever.
Yeah.
um, but yeah, game development is a time-consuming process. So I'm not going to commit to any specific time, but it's a
Right.
few years down the road, most
Yeah, you have
likely.
to get it right. Yeah. No,
Yeah.
definitely. You have to, like, finish what you are proud of. So, no, that's great. Are there any, I would say, because you have so much experience in, like, and everything, and I love how you have the different themes for the days that you have to do things. So, is any industry secrets that you can share since you worked at big studios before that will help other indie game developers, and also anything since working at a big studio that has helped you in your indie game journey?
So the working at a big studio is very different from like working solo. So
Mhm.
working in a big studio, I'm kind of a subset of a subset of a subset of a discipline. You've got like the programmers, and then within that you've got the gameplay programmers, and then with that you've got like AI programmers and like game mode programmers and UI programmers, and I was primarily focused on combat and a bit of character movement. A lot of that stuff came in useful for implementing my own stuff. But also, I kind of have a mindset of setting stuff up for designers, which in a way I almost feel like it may be a detriment, because I spend all this time like when I'm working at a studio, like I am doing the programming and someone else is doing the tuning of the weapons and things like that. So I've got to expose all of these parameters that can be tuned through data settings and stuff like that. So you've got like the rate of fire of the weapon and the damage and the recoil and all of these things to define the behavior. But as a solo dev, I think honestly, I probably would be better off if I just like hard coded a bunch of stuff because like, I'm programming, right, that I can just write the numbers right in data. But fortunately with a Godot engine, it does make it pretty easy to just expose values and then go in and tweak it in data. I I mean, I think the biggest advice I can give to people is just do stuff. Do it in the most straightforward way that you can think of. And then if that doesn't work, change it. Don't be afraid. A lot of people want to build up all of these like elaborate systems and future proof it and be like, well, what if we had this and what if we had that? I would say just implement it for the case that you have. And then if
Yep.
you need to make it more generic, then go in and make it more generic and be able to handle multiple use cases. But don't go building these big elaborate systems if you're just a solo dev. You're the only one that's going to be tweaking those things. So just
Right.
do it in the quickest way possible. And then if that doesn't work out, then go back and rewrite it. Once you've done it a couple, if you're using the same thing a couple times and just like copy pasting a bunch of stuff, then it's like, okay, now maybe it's time to make something a little more generic. But like in the industry, you had to make these big generic systems because you didn't necessarily know exactly how things were going to be used because the designer might want to do this, they might want to do that. And then you got to have the flexibility to let them do all those different things so they don't have to come back and be like, can you program this? Oh, wait, I want to do that. Can you program this? So in my experience, I was setting up all of these elaborate weapon systems and such that the designers could go in and tweak all those parameters to their heart's content without having to go back and forth because there's, a bit of time. Like they want something and then I got to implement it and then they got to push out a new build, compile a new build and then download that. And inevitably somebody else checked in, broke something. And then
Yeah, you have to do it all over again. Yeah.
that's one of the big things in the industry that I don't miss is that we had a saying going around that like if each person only broke the build one time, when you've got like hundreds of people working on a project, that means there's enough people breaking the build to cover every single day of the project. And it's like, but it's unrealistic that each
Realistic, yeah.
person's only going to break the build one day
One
during the whole
day, yep.
project. So in reality, it's like the build is broken 2 or 3 times a day, and then you got to wait for fix, and then you got to download it and recompile it, or sync
It's a
up, recompile,
never-ending
all that stuff.
cycle.
So it is very refreshing to be able to work on my own thing and just go in and do something. And if something is broken, I'll be like, oh, that thing I did last week, that's probably what broke it because it was working. It was working. When you've got 100+ other people in there, you're like, all right, who broke this? And maybe it was a data setting, and then it gets assigned to a programmer, and the programmer has to go in there and be like, well, okay, some artist went in there and set this thing that broke it. That's actually not a programmer bug. That's a data bug. But the programmers still have to look at it to figure it out because nobody knows what's causing it.
Right. Yeah.
But
No,
yeah.
no. So and that brings me to my other question, like the recoil jump is unusual, like, in the game,
Mm.
so how did you balance, like, the fun of it with control for the players? Like, how did you figure all that out?
Yeah, mobility in shooters is something that I really love. So I like having all of the weapons have some kind of mobility. And a lot of them have just basic recoil. Like you can use the shotgun and you can get a little bit of a recoil jump firing one barrel, but if you fire all three barrels, you get a decent boost off of that. And we also did something like that in the game Lawbreakers, where there'd be zero gravity, and Cliff really wanted this feature where you could just aim the gun behind you and shoot it, and it would propel you forward through the zero G area. So I had, some experience implementing things like that for that project. And so all these years of, working on Quake and Lawbreakers and other shooters kind of all allowed me to implement all kinds of crazy weapon features and stuff that I've played with over the years, or new stuff that I've never done, but just sounded really cool, like the time vampire, where the alt fire creates this bubble, and anything that's in that bubble gets slowed down. They get slowed down more toward the middle, and then you can fire projectiles. And as the projectiles go in, they slow down, and then the bubble expires, and then all the projectiles fly, and the enemies all get shot and go flying. It's really fun. But I just had like that vision in my head of, wouldn't it be cool if you had like a group of cultists, and then you fire this time bubble, and they all freeze or go in slow mo basically, and then you fire all these giant wooden spikes at them, and then the time bubble expires, and then they all get pinned to the walls all at the same time.
Well, I would not wanna be in that room, I tell you that for sure. So, what's pushing you forward as we move up to the attic? What's pushing you forward? Like, KOOK is gonna be released, you said, probably in 2 years, but what's like, this is a lot of work. Like,
It
it's a
is.
like, it's a lot of work and you have so much passion for it, but what is it that's pushing you forward? Is it the passion? Is it just seeing, like, people, like, talk about your game and, like, ask questions and stuff? Like, what propels you?
Yeah, so there's definitely a lot of passion there, and a lot of people, ask about, what do you do to stay motivated? And the thing that I say is that you can't rely on motivation. Motivation is like the spark or the match that gets the fire started, but you've got to keep putting wood on the fire to keep that going. And it's not always glamorous, it's not always exciting. So one of the big things that's helped me is having that consistent streaming schedule. So I've got a bit of accountability because we've got a handful of people that are, waiting for me to stream every day. And if I don't show up, then I'm going to disappoint them. So, I've got that that factor to kind of push me to keep working on it. But the game has been coming along, and it's really shaping up, and it's a lot of fun to play. And there have been a few times where, after the stream, I've just kind of hopped around on the levels and stuff, and just had fun running around shooting stuff or playing with the weird gravity and stuff. I just posted a screenshot Saturday today of this sort of in an unintentional feature that I figured out, where I've got gravity that kind of goes around a cylinder, and I've also got this kind of bunny hopping mechanic. For people that are familiar with like the Quake series of games, they know that you can like build up speed from jumping around repeatedly. And I've tried to make that a little bit more accessible than the Quake series, where you have to do some kind of weird strafe movement. Like in KOOK, it's just every time you jump, you get a little extra momentum. So if you just keep jumping, you just build up that momentum. And I found out that if you keep jumping and build up that momentum and then go around this kind of cylindrical gravity, you can actually go into orbit, and you'll have so much momentum that you keep flying around, and
What?
you'll land on the other side without ever touching the ground. And so it's just fun stuff like that. Like, you know, that kind of helps keep me going as well, because it's just like,
Yeah.
that's just fun, that's cool. It wasn't something that I was like explicitly designing, but I want to have all of these toys in the game that you can play with, that you can do crazy stuff. Like I said, we've got so many different things that you can do for mobility and the weapons. I talked about like the shotgun jumping. I've got you can do explosive jumping, like grenade jumping and rocket jumping, like in Quake and many other games. But the grenade also has a gravity grenade alt fire where you can shoot a grenade up in the air and then it pulls things toward it. And so you can actually put that up there and you can jump into it and sling yourself. And if you do it just right and run into it right as it's expiring, it pulls you in and then expires and you just keep all that momentum and just like slingshot yourself flying like super
Wow.
crazy fast. And then like the time vampire that shoots those giant wooden spikes, you can put those spikes in the wall and create yourself a little staircase and then run up and maybe
Yeah.
get into some secret area or something like that.
So this
So
is oh,
that
it's like reminding me of when you're describing all this, it reminds me of like I'm watching a Marvel movie. So I'm
mm,
like, man, I hope, if Marvel watches this, they don't hope they better not steal your idea because obviously you own it. Like this is so cool with like a cool villain would have like, especially the gravity one. That's amazing. And I love
yeah,
vampires, so I love
the
that
big
part
spikes
as
and
well.
stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. I love that
Yeah.
too.
I mean, for me, I think everyone has ideas. There's so many ideas going around. It's almost impossible to have an original idea. So, I wouldn't claim that all of these are original ideas. Like the time vampire spikes are heavily inspired by the penetrator from Fear, where you could like stick people to walls. And then there's also Painkiller had a weapon kind of like that too. So it's not like it's a super original concept, but I think it's all in the implementation. Like
Mhm.
that's where ideas are made or broken is how they're implemented in the game and if they're fun to play with. And I think in Kook they are pretty fun to play with. That's I just try to give the players all kinds of toys and let them approach the levels how they will. And hopefully it ends up being like really cool stuff and not just like, oh, if you go over here in the corner just right, you like teleport to the end of the level and like so many speedrunners do. But I'm hoping to see like these crazy speedrun videos where people are like, chaining all kinds of weapons together to build up momentum and like launch off of a roof and then, perfectly time the spike to put it into a wall to jump off of it to go somewhere else or something like that. That would be really neat to see.
That'd be awesome. So, as we get to the final room, this is the part where I always ask our house guests, what is the creepiest thing that's ever happened to you and what's the coolest thing that's ever happened to you? Because this is the Looks Creepy Cool podcast.
Mm,
Any
hmm.
order is fine.
Yeah, I'm trying to think. There have definitely been some like since I'm nocturnal, I tend to take night walks. I'm walking around at like 3 or 4 a.m. because that's just when I'm up. I finish the stream and I go get some food and take a walk and stuff like that.
What's
And
open at 3 to 4 a.m.?
well, I'm not like going to anywhere. I'm just
Oh,
walking to get some exercise.
oh, okay. Okay.
But the thing that's always funny is like when it's dark and it's quiet, how large things can sound. Like I was walking one night and I heard this rustling in the bushes and it sounded like a massive creature. Like I thought it was a deer or something like that. And there's all this like rustling and it's getting louder and it's getting louder and it's getting closer and it's getting closer. And then out crawls this little possum.
Thank
Just
God it was
right in
just
front.
the possum.
Yeah, yeah, and it's like, "Wait, you were making all that noise? Like, what would it have been if it were a bear or something like that? That would have been, like, sounding crazy."
So what would you have
And
done? What do you do? What would you do? If it
well,
say
that
it was a
time,
bear or
I
anything?
was just kinda curious because it's not like there's anything in my area that's
Mhm.
harmful. We don't have, like, tigers or bears or anything like that.
Yeah.
But, I was stood there and waited because I was curious. I was like, "What is making all this noise?"
Oh my
Because it
god.
sounds like crazy. But then there have been times when it is actually a deer, and then that's like that much larger sounding. Sometimes they'll do this snort when they're startled. Like you're walking along, and all of a sudden, and it's like, what was that?
It's like, "Oh no, a human. Get out of here."
Yeah, yeah.
Just wow. So
And then
what's the
there,
coolest thing that's happened to you?
man, been a lot of cool things. But I mean, just being able to build games by myself. I'm in a fortunate situation where I've got enough money saved up that because I was able to work in the industry for a while and get decent pay and then save up enough money
Yeah.
and
Smart.
be
Yeah.
able to like go off on my own. And then just the live streaming community on Twitch, the game dev community is really awesome. There's so many cool people out there that are supporting me, either just either just being there and providing moral support, or subscribing on Twitch or Patreon or whatever. Just the fact that I've been able to do this as long as I have, because I've just been getting some extra runway from the financial support. And, just the community itself is awesome. I love hanging out with the people that are watching the stream, or, sometimes going to other people's streams and hanging out in there. So just, it's not like a singular event, but just the whole thing is awesome. Like I love doing this and hope I can continue to do so.
Well, you will, and we can't wait to let us know when KOOK is finally released, and as well as other games that you're working on. We're super happy to have you at the Haunted House Fear Fest Festival and on the Looks Creepy Cool podcast. And everyone, I like to call them I like to call them the watchers of the house, the audience. So just want to say the festival starts October 6th through November 6th for Steam, only allows us for 2 weeks, so October 6th through October 19th. And we are super happy to have Nathan here. Hope to see many more of him on the show and at the festival. And Nate, any links you want to share with me, just send it to me after, and I will
All
add it
right.
in the description. It'll be posted everywhere. So thank you so much, guys. Have a great evening and still continue to watch the house, and we'll talk to you soon. Want more chills and chatter? We're streaming on all podcast platforms.